If it wasn't for that dog, she might not have made it through the night. The flashing red and blue lights reflected across the quiet suburban street as two police officers stood just outside a small white house, their voices low but urgent, while inside, a golden retriever named Max paced back and forth, his body tense, his eyes locked on the front door as if he knew something no one else did, something no one wanted to believe. Just 24 hours earlier, everything had seemed completely normal. Or at least that's what Emily Carter thought when she casually uploaded a photo to her social media page. A simple picture taken in her living room. Nothing dramatic, nothing staged, just her standing near the window with Max sitting beside her, the late afternoon sun casting soft shadows across the hardwood floor, and yet within minutes, the comments started pouring in faster than she could read them. Strangers from all over the country pointing out something strange, something unsettling, something that didn't quite belong in the frame, but Emily brushed it off at first, assuming it was just internet overreaction, people seeing things that weren't really there, because from her perspective, it was just another ordinary snapshot of her quiet life. But Max didn't see it that way. The moment Emily opened the photo on her phone again, the dog's entire demeanor changed, his ears perked up sharply, his posture stiffening as he let out a low, uneasy growl that she had never heard before, not directed at a person, not even toward the door, but straight at the screen itself, as if the image carried a scent or a sound invisible to human senses. And when Emily laughed it off, gently telling him to calm down, Max refused, stepping closer, pressing his nose against the phone, then backing away, pacing in tight circles, his tail rigid, his breathing shallow, like he was trying to warn her of something just out of reach. Later that evening, her neighbor Daniel Brooks stopped by after seeing the viral post online, shaking his head with a half-smile, dismissing the entire situation as another internet exaggeration, telling Emily that people love to turn nothing into something, that her dog was probably just reacting to light or movement on the screen. But even as he spoke, Max positioned himself between Emily and the hallway leading deeper into the house, his body forming a quiet barrier, his eyes darting back and forth between the photo in Emily's hand and the darkened space behind her. And for a brief moment, there was a flicker of uncertainty in Brooks' expression, but it passed just as quickly as it came. That night, Emily tried to go to bed, assuming everything would settle. But Max wouldn't let her. He stayed alert, refusing to lie down, pacing from room to room, occasionally stopping at the exact same spot near the living room window where the photo had been taken, staring into the glass, as if expecting something to appear, something that had already been captured once before. And as the hours passed, the house grew quieter, heavier, until even Emily began to feel it, that subtle, creeping sense that something wasn't right, that maybe the internet wasn't wrong, and maybe, just maybe, Max wasn't reacting to the picture at all. Maybe he was reacting to what the picture had seen. Emily did not sleep that night. Not really, because every time she closed her eyes she could hear Max moving, his nails tapping lightly against the hardwood floor in an uneven rhythm that never seemed to settle, and each time she sat up to check on him, she found him in a different position, but always facing the same direction, always watching that stretch of wall near the living room window, as if something invisible was standing there, something that refused to leave. By 2:17 in the morning, she finally gave up trying to ignore it and grabbed her phone again, opening the photo that had started everything, her fingers hesitating for a second before she zoomed in slowly, inch by inch, her breath catching as she focused on the reflection in the glass behind her, because at first it still looked like nothing, just the faint outline of the room, the soft blur of furniture. But then her eyes adjusted, and she noticed a shape that did not belong, something darker than the rest, positioned just slightly off-center, too tall and too defined to be a shadow. And for a moment, she told herself it was just a trick of the light, just her mind catching on to what strangers online had suggested. But then Max let out a low, sharp bark that made her jump, and when she looked over at him, he was not looking at her. He was looking at the exact same spot in the room that appeared in the reflection. A chill ran through her as she slowly turned her head toward the window, the glass reflecting her own pale expression back at her. But nothing else, nothing that should have been there. And yet Max stepped forward again, placing himself directly between her and that space, his body rigid, his ears pinned back, as if he was bracing for something that had not happened yet. Emily swallowed hard and tried to steady her breathing, telling herself there had to be a logical explanation. Maybe the angle of the photo had captured something from outside, maybe a passing figure, maybe even Daniel Brooks walking by earlier, but the timeline did not make sense, and neither did the way Max reacted every time she shifted her position, adjusting himself to keep that invisible line between her and the spot he refused to ignore. She stood there for what felt like minutes, but could have been seconds, caught in that strange silence where every small sound seemed amplified, until finally she forced herself to move, taking a cautious step toward the window, her eyes flicking between the glass and the empty room around her, her heart beating faster with each inch. But the moment she crossed a certain point, Max lunged forward, not aggressively but urgently, pressing against her leg to stop her from getting any closer, a soft whine escaping him as if he was begging her to stay back. And that was the moment something shifted inside her, something deeper than fear, something closer to realization, because dogs did not act like this without reason, not like this, not with this level of focus and persistence. Her phone buzzed suddenly in her hand, breaking the tension as a new notification appeared, more comments flooding in on the photo, some confused, some alarmed, some insisting she needed to look closer, that there was something behind her, something that should not have been there, and for the first time since posting it, Emily did not feel like dismissing them, because standing in that quiet room with Max refusing to leave her side, she began to understand that whatever had been captured in that picture might not be gone at all. Emily's hands were trembling now, not wildly, but just enough that she could feel it in her fingertips as she tightened her grip around her phone. Her eyes locked on the reflection in the glass while Max remained frozen in place beside her, his entire body aligned toward that same invisible point, as if the room itself had shifted around it. The silence stretched again, heavy and unnatural, until another sound broke through, faint but distinct, a soft creak from somewhere deeper in the house. Subtle enough that she might have dismissed it on any other night, but not now, not after everything, not with Max reacting the way he was, his head snapping slightly toward the hallway before returning to that fixed position, as if he was tracking something that moved without being seen. Emily felt her chest tighten as she slowly turned her body, her eyes scanning the darkened corridor that led toward the kitchen and back door, every shadow suddenly feeling sharper, more defined, like it was holding something just beneath the surface, and she realized with a sinking feeling that she had never actually checked the rest of the house after posting that photo, never walked through each room, never made sure everything was exactly as it should be. "It is nothing," she whispered under her breath, the words sounding weaker than she intended, almost like she was trying to convince herself rather than stating a fact. But Max did not respond to her voice this time, did not relax or look at her. Instead, he took a slow step forward, then another, moving carefully as if he was following a path only he could see, his nose lifting slightly, his breathing steady but focused, and Emily felt herself following him without thinking, drawn forward by the quiet urgency in his movements. Each step felt heavier than the last as they approached the hallway, the distance only a few feet, but somehow stretching into something far longer. The air cooler, the stillness thicker, until Max stopped abruptly at the edge of the doorway and let out a low, controlled growl that seemed to vibrate through the floor beneath them. Emily froze just behind him, her eyes trying to adjust to the dim lights spilling in from the living room, casting long shadows down the hall, and that was when she noticed it, something small but unmistakable. The back door, which she always kept locked, was not fully closed. It sat slightly ajar, just enough for a thin line of darkness to separate it from the frame, and a faint draft brushed against her skin as if something had moved through it not long ago. Her heart began to pound harder now, each beat louder in her ears as her mind raced through possibilities, trying to find a reasonable explanation. Maybe she had forgotten to latch it earlier, maybe Max had nudged it open, but none of it felt right, none of it matched the tension in the room. The way Max refused to move forward, yet refused to step back, holding his ground like a barrier between her and whatever lay beyond that door. Another notification buzzed in her hand, louder this time in the silence, and without taking her eyes off the hallway, she glanced down at the screen. A new comment highlighted at the top, from someone she did not know, reading in all caps, Look behind the window again. And for a split second she hesitated, torn between the growing unease in front of her and the pull of that message. But something inside her shifted, a realization forming as she slowly lifted the phone back up, because if Max had been reacting to the same spot all along, if he had been trying to keep her away from something, then maybe the picture was not showing her what was there now. Maybe it was showing her what had already been there before, something that had not left at all. Emily's breath felt shallow now, each inhale measured, each exhale quieter than the last, as if even the sound of it might disturb whatever unseen presence lingered in the house. And without fully realizing it, she slowly began to back away from the hallway, her feet moving inch by inch across the floor while her eyes remained fixed on that slightly open door, that narrow gap that seemed far too deliberate to be accidental. And Max mirrored her movement perfectly, stepping backward with her, never turning his back, never breaking his focus, his low growl fading into a tense silence that felt even more unsettling than before. Her phone screen still glowed in her hand, the comment staring back at her. Look behind the window again. And this time she did not hesitate. She tapped the image, zooming in further than she had before, her fingers pinching outward as the reflection filled more of the screen, every pixel stretching, every shadow becoming clearer, and her heart skipped as she noticed something she had missed, something that had not been obvious at first glance. Because the shape in the reflection was not just standing there, it was positioned slightly differently than she remembered, not directly behind her as she stood in the photo, but off to the side, closer to the hallway entrance, closer to where she and Max were now, standing in real time. A cold realization began to settle in as her eyes moved between the phone and the actual room around her, aligning the angles, comparing distances, and for the first time, the picture did not feel like a past moment frozen in time. It felt like a map, a snapshot of positioning, showing exactly where something had been standing, and if that position had changed even slightly between then and now, it meant one thing: something had moved. Max suddenly shifted again, not forward this time but sideways, stepping just enough to block her from a new angle, his head turning slightly toward the living room window, as if recalculating, as if whatever he sensed was no longer in the same place. And Emily followed his gaze instinctively, her eyes drifting toward the glass, expecting to see her own reflection again, the familiar outline of her face, the dim shapes of the room behind her. But as she stared, something felt off, not visible at first, just a subtle imbalance. Like the reflection did not match the space exactly, and she leaned slightly to the side, her heart pounding as she tried to understand what she was seeing. The angle shifted just enough for it to become clear. The reflection was not empty behind her anymore. There was a faint distortion, something that did not belong to the room, not a clear figure, not a defined shape, but enough to suggest presence, enough to make her breath catch as her mind struggled to process it. Her pulse raced as she instinctively stepped back again, her shoulder brushing lightly against the wall, and in that exact moment, Max let out a sharp bark, louder than anything he had done before, and lunged just a few inches forward, stopping abruptly as if he had reached an invisible boundary, his entire body tense as he stared at that same spot in the reflection. Emily's fingers tightened around her phone as another realization struck her, stronger than the last. Because if the reflection was showing something that she could not see directly, if it was revealing something hidden in plain sight, then whatever was in her house right now was not just behind her. It was close, much closer than she had allowed herself to believe, and for the first time since this started, she understood why Max had not let her move freely, why he had stayed between her and certain parts of the house. Because he was not reacting to a memory in a photograph, he was reacting to something that was still here, still shifting, still just out of view. Emily could feel it now, not as a sound, not as something she could see directly, but as a presence that pressed against the edges of her awareness, something that made the air feel heavier, as if the space around her had quietly shifted without her noticing, and Max was the only one who had been aware of it from the very beginning. Her eyes flickered between the reflection in the window and the actual room behind her, trying desperately to reconcile the two, to understand how something could appear in one and not the other. And yet every instinct inside her was now telling her the same thing. The reflection was not lying. It was revealing something she was not meant to see so easily. Max let out another low sound, softer this time, but more urgent, and he began to move again, not toward the hallway and not toward the door, but along the wall, step by careful step, guiding her. Without looking back, as if he knew she would follow, as if he understood that she had finally begun to trust him, and without thinking, Emily matched his pace, her body tense, her breathing shallow as they moved slowly across the living room, toward the far corner where the light from the window barely reached. The shadows there seemed thicker, deeper, and as she approached, she noticed something that made her stomach drop, the faint outline of the same distortion she had seen in the reflection. Not clearly visible, not something she could point to directly, but enough to suggest that something occupied that space, something that shifted ever so slightly when she adjusted her angle, like it was avoiding being seen head-on. Her fingers tightened around her phone as she lifted it again, almost instinctively using the screen like a lens, and as the camera view opened, her breath caught in her throat because what she saw through the screen did not match what her eyes alone could see. The distortion became clearer, more defined, not a full figure but a presence that disrupted the light, standing just a few feet away from where she now stood, closer than she had imagined, closer than she wanted to accept. Max positioned himself directly in front of her again, his body forming a barrier, his stance firm, and for a moment everything froze. The room, the air, even her thoughts, as if time itself had paused around that invisible line. Then her phone buzzed again, breaking the stillness, and she glanced down quickly. Another message, this one different from the others, not a comment, but a direct message from someone who claimed to be a security technician, someone who had seen the image and noticed something specific, something that made Emily's pulse spike as she read the words carefully. Check your home cameras if you have any, especially near the back door. And suddenly everything clicked into place. The slightly open door, the timing of the photo, Max's reaction to specific areas of the house. It all pointed to something far more real than she had allowed herself to believe. She swallowed hard, her mind racing as she tried to remember if her small security system was still active, if the cameras she had installed months ago were still recording. And without taking her eyes off the space in front of her, she slowly opened the app on her phone, her hands steadying just enough to navigate through the menus, until the live feed appeared, grainy in the low light, but clear enough to show the back hallway. The same hallway where the door had been slightly open, and for a moment it looked empty. Just a quiet stretch of space with nothing out of place. But then, as the image refreshed, something changed, something subtle but undeniable, a shift in the frame that did not match the stillness of the house. And Emily's heart pounded harder, as she realized she was no longer just looking at a reflection or a theory. She was watching something move in real time. Emily's vision narrowed as she stared at the live camera feed, her mind struggling to process what her eyes were seeing because the hallway on the screen looked empty at first glance, completely still, exactly as it should have been, and yet there was something wrong with it, something that did not match the quiet reality around her. A subtle distortion that flickered for just a fraction of a second near the edge of the frame, like a shadow shifting without a source, and her breath caught as she leaned closer, her fingers tightening around the phone as if that would somehow make the image clearer. Max remained planted firmly in front of her, his body tense, his gaze fixed not on the screen but on the physical space ahead of them, as if he was tracking the same movement in real time, his ears twitching slightly with each faint sound that Emily could barely register. And suddenly the connection became undeniable. Whatever was on that camera was not separate from what was in the house. It was the same presence, moving, adjusting, staying just out of direct view. The feed refreshed again, and this time the shift was more noticeable, a slight change in the lighting along the wall, as if something had passed between the camera and the surface, something that blocked the light for a brief second before disappearing again. And Emily felt a surge of cold realization wash over her, because there was no delay now, no gap between past and present. She was watching it happen as it unfolded, and it was getting closer. Her heart pounded harder as she slowly lifted her gaze from the phone to the hallway itself, her eyes scanning the same area she had just seen on the screen. But again there was nothing clearly visible, just the same quiet corridor, the same slightly open door, the same stillness that now felt anything but safe. And yet Max reacted instantly, stepping forward just 1 inch, then stopping again, his body angled protectively, his low growl returning, deeper this time, more certain, as if whatever he sensed had crossed an invisible line. Emily swallowed hard, her thoughts racing as she tried to decide what to do next, every instinct telling her to leave, to get out of the house immediately, but her feet would not move, not yet. Not while she felt like she did not fully understand what was happening. And almost without thinking, she switched the camera view to playback, scrolling back just a few minutes, her eyes scanning the footage quickly, searching for the moment where everything had changed. At first it was nothing, just empty frames, quiet stillness. But then she saw it, a faint shift near the back door, the handle moving slightly, not opening fully but just enough to create that same narrow gap she had noticed earlier, and her stomach dropped as she realized that she had not imagined it. That door had been closed before, and something had opened it. Max let out a sharp bark at that exact moment, his reaction perfectly timed with what she saw on the screen, and Emily's pulse spiked as she scrolled forward again, watching as the camera struggled to capture what happened next, the image flickering slightly, the lighting distorting in a way that made it impossible to define a clear shape, but unmistakably showing movement, something entering, something stepping into the house without ever becoming fully visible. Her breathing became shallow as she looked up again, her eyes darting between the hallway and the screen, trying to align the positions, trying to understand where it was now. And then it hit her, the reflection, the photo, the angle, everything pointed to one thing. It was no longer near the door. It had already moved deeper inside, and Max was not just reacting to its presence, he was tracking it, step by step, keeping himself between Emily and something that was now much closer than either of them could see. Emily's thoughts began to unravel under the weight of what she now knew, not imagined, not suspected, but knew with a certainty that made her chest feel tight and heavy, because whatever had entered her home was not outside anymore. It was not near the door, it was somewhere inside, moving quietly, deliberately, staying just beyond the edge of her vision, and Max was the only thing standing between her and it. Her eyes flicked once more to the phone screen, watching the live feed as it refreshed again, and this time the movement was impossible to ignore, a clear shift in the frame near the center of the hallway. Not a full figure but a distortion that bent the light in a way that should not have been possible, as if something was occupying space without allowing itself to be fully seen. And her breath caught as she realized that the position on the screen matched exactly where Max was now facing in real life. Her pulse raced as she slowly lifted her gaze from the phone to the room ahead, her eyes scanning that same invisible line. And for a split second, she thought she saw it too. Not clearly, not something she could describe, but enough to make her step back instinctively, her shoulder pressing against the wall as a wave of fear washed over her. Max reacted instantly, stepping forward just enough to close the distance, placing himself directly in front of her again, his body low, his stance firm, his eyes locked onto that unseen presence as if he refused to let it come any closer. And in that moment, Emily understood something she had been avoiding since the beginning. Max was not just warning her, he was protecting her. A sudden knock at the front door shattered the silence, sharp and unexpected, making Emily flinch as her heart leapt into her throat. And for a brief moment, she felt a surge of relief, hoping it was Daniel Brooks returning, or maybe even someone else drawn by the viral post. But Max did not move toward the sound, did not relax, did not shift his attention even for a second, and that hesitation stopped her from moving as well, because if Max did not trust it, neither should she. The knock came again, louder this time, followed by a voice calling out her name from the other side, familiar but strained. "Emily, it is Daniel. Open the door." And she felt her body tense, caught between the instinct to answer and the growing awareness that something about this situation did not feel right, not after everything that had happened, not with Max still standing rigidly between her and the hallway. Her phone buzzed again in her hand, and she glanced down quickly, another message from the same security technician, the words sending a chill through her entire body as she read them. "Do not trust what you hear without verifying it visually. The feed shows movement near your front entry too." And Emily's breath hitched as she slowly turned her head toward the front door, her eyes narrowing as she tried to focus, the familiar shape of the entrance now feeling distant, uncertain, as if it was no longer as simple as it had always been. The voice outside called again, more urgent now, but something about the tone felt slightly off, not enough to be obvious, just enough to create doubt, and Max's reaction confirmed it, his growl deepening as he shifted slightly, positioning himself not just between her and the hallway, but angling his body to block her from moving toward the door as well, as if he was guarding both directions at once. Emily's heart pounded as she stood there, caught in the middle of two unknowns, one behind her, one in front of her, and for the first time since this began, she realized the full extent of the danger, because whatever was inside her house was not alone, and whatever was outside might not be who it claimed to be. And Max was the only one who seemed to understand exactly what was happening. Emily's mind raced as the tension in the house reached a breaking point, her body frozen between the front door and the hallway, between the voice calling her name and the unseen presence moving somewhere behind Max. And for a moment she felt completely trapped, not knowing which direction held more danger, not knowing what was real and what was not. The knocking came again, sharper now, followed by Daniel Brooks' voice, more insistent, urging her to open the door, but there was something about it that no longer felt right, something subtle but unmistakable, like a perfect imitation that lacked a certain human warmth. And Max's reaction made it impossible to ignore, his growl deepening as he shifted slightly to block her path, his body now positioned in a way that protected her from both sides, his instincts refusing to choose one threat over the other because he understood that both mattered. Emily swallowed hard and forced herself to focus, her breathing uneven as she looked down at her phone again, switching back to the live camera feed, her fingers trembling as she navigated between angles, and when the front entry camera loaded, her heart skipped, because the image did not match what she was hearing. The porch was empty, completely still, no figure, no movement, nothing that could explain the voice calling from just outside the door, and the realization hit her instantly, cold and sharp. The voice was not coming from someone standing there, it was coming from somewhere else. Her pulse surged as she slowly lifted her eyes toward the door, the wood now feeling like the only barrier between her and whatever was trying to reach her. And for the first time she understood that opening it might be the worst possible choice. Max took a small step forward, his body low, his gaze shifting briefly toward the hallway again. And that was when Emily noticed something she had not seen before. The reflection on the polished surface of a nearby picture frame, faint but clear enough to catch a glimpse of movement, a distortion that flickered just behind them, closer than before, aligning with the same position she had seen on the camera moments earlier. Her breath caught as she realized it had moved again, not away from them but toward them, closing the distance slowly, deliberately, and Max reacted instantly, letting out a sharp bark as he stepped forward, his stance firm, his body creating a solid barrier between Emily and that advancing presence. The knocking at the door stopped abruptly, the voice falling silent, and for a brief second the house was completely still, the kind of silence that pressed in from all sides, making every small movement feel amplified. And then her phone buzzed again, another message from the technician, the words appearing on the screen as if timed perfectly with everything unfolding around her. It is tracking your position through reflection and sound. Stay where you are. Do not respond. Help is on the way. And Emily felt a wave of fear and relief collide inside her chest, her eyes darting around the room as she tried to remain still, as she tried to trust the only constant in this entire situation, Max. Seconds stretched into what felt like minutes as the tension built, the air growing heavier, until finally, faint but unmistakable, the distant sound of approaching sirens reached her ears, cutting through the silence like a lifeline. And for the first time since this began, Max's posture shifted ever so slightly, not relaxing completely but adjusting, as if he sensed something different, something that did not carry the same threat. And Emily stood there, barely breathing, holding on to that fragile moment, knowing that whatever had been moving in her home was now closer than ever, but also knowing that help was finally coming, and that Max had kept her safe long enough for it to arrive. The sound of the sirens grew louder with each passing second, echoing through the quiet street outside as flashing lights began to reflect faintly against the walls of the living room. And for the first time since the night began, Emily felt something shift inside her, not the tension, not the fear, but a fragile sense of hope that she had been holding onto without realizing it. Max remained in front of her, his body still tense, his gaze fixed forward, but there was a subtle change in his posture, a slight easing that told her he sensed something different, something that did not carry the same threat as before, and she held on to that, trusting him completely now in a way she had not just hours earlier. The front door rattled. Suddenly, as a firm voice called out from outside, clear and authoritative, identifying themselves as police. And this time, everything felt different. The tone, the presence, the certainty, and Max did not react with aggression. He did not growl or block her path. Instead, he stood his ground but allowed her to move, just enough for her to take a cautious step forward. Emily's hands trembled as she approached the door, her heart still racing, her mind still replaying everything that had happened. And for a brief moment she hesitated, her hand hovering over the handle as she glanced back at Max, seeking reassurance. And he gave it in the only way he could, by remaining calm, by no longer resisting her movement. She unlocked the door slowly and opened it just enough to see two officers standing there, their expressions serious but steady, their presence grounding in a way that instantly broke through the fear that had filled the house. And as she stepped back to let them in, the air seemed to shift again, the tension loosening just slightly, as if whatever had been inside no longer held the same control over the space. The officers moved carefully but confidently, scanning the house with practiced attention, their flashlights cutting through the dimness. And although Emily could not see anything directly, she noticed the way one of them paused near the hallway, his gaze lingering on a specific spot before he exchanged a brief look with his partner, something unspoken passing between them that made her chest tighten again. Max stayed close to Emily's side now, no longer blocking her, but still alert, his eyes following every movement, as if he was making sure the threat was truly gone. And after what felt like an eternity, but was only a few minutes, one of the officers returned to her, his expression softening slightly as he spoke, explaining that there had been signs of an attempted entry through the back door, subtle enough to go unnoticed at first, but real enough to confirm that someone had been there earlier, someone who had not fully gained access but had tried, and that the movement she had seen, the distortions, the reflections, they were likely caused by shifting light and partial obstruction from outside combined with the open door and reflective surfaces inside, creating an illusion that played out differently on camera and in glass. Emily listened, her mind slowly piecing it together, the fear giving way to understanding, the mystery unraveling into something real but grounded, and she felt her knees weaken slightly as the weight of it all settled in, because the danger had been real, just not in the way she had imagined, and Max had sensed it long before she did. She looked down at him, her eyes filling with emotion as she